Today, class, our instruction is in Chapter 17 on methods of persuasion. Now, there are 4 reasons that people are persuaded. They perceive that you, the speaker, has high credibility. They are convinced by the strong evidence that you use, or they're convinced by the reasoning that you use to draw your conclusions. Or, 4th, their emotions are touched. Experts agree that these 4 reasons are some of the primary reasons that people are persuaded. You'll need to understand all 4. Let's look at the first, credibility. How do we build it? Aristotle called this ethos. There are 3 factors of credibility: competence, character, charisma. Now, competence is how the audience regards your intelligence, your knowledge, your experience, your expertise. You demonstrate that with your citations and the research that you've done to prepare for this speech. Character is how the audience regards your sincerity. Are you trustworthy? Do you have their best interest at heart? Are you concerned about the audience? And if they perceive this, then you have developed the factor of character in your persuasive speech. The last is charisma. And one author called this energy from the heart zone. In class, this is where you have passion, you have energy, you have deep conviction and enthusiasm about what you're speaking about. If you do not have this, you will not transfer your energy, you will not transfer your feeling to the audience. And really great speakers transfer their feeling to the listeners. That's charisma. It's not something you're necessarily born with. It is something you can develop. Now, those are the 3 factors: competence, character, and charisma. 3 types of credibility are initial, derived, and terminal. Initial is the credibility, the trust that we give you when you stand up to speak. We assume you've done some good research. You're not going to waste our time. Derived is, as you speak, we say that person really has done some good research. They are quoting some strong experts. They have good evidence and supporting material. Their reasoning is sound, and your credibility builds as we listen to you. And then there's terminal credibility, and that's the credibility we give you at the end of the speech. Perhaps you started off low, you may end up high. You may start off high and end up low, depending on how well you present and deliver your information and what kind of research you did. Now, how do you enhance credibility, since it's such a critical factor in persuading others? Well, explain your competence. If you investigated this thoroughly, tell us that you did. If you have experience in this area, tell us that you have experience. Establish common ground. Share with the audience that we have the same values, we have the same attitudes, and share similar experiences that you've had with the audience. That develops a commonplace for you and the audience, and it allows them to connect with you and give you a fair hearing to your speech. And then, of course, we've said it already, we'll say it again and again: speak with conviction. Credibility is strongly influenced by your delivery. Now, the second method is using strong evidence. Aristotle called this logos. It's using supporting materials that prove or disprove your conclusions. How does it work? Well, you can't just say something's true because I think so. Not at all. You have to offer strong evidence, and this is where your statistics, your expert testimony, peer testimony perhaps, and even stories and examples come to play. Tips for using evidence: be specific. Don't just say lots of people, say 36 million people. Give us new evidence. If you use evidence that we are already familiar with, doesn't influence us. New, unfamiliar, unknown evidence tends to influence an audience. Use credible sources. Please make sure they're unbiased. And make your point clear. What is your evidence proving? Don't assume we will know or we will figure it out, because we won't. The third method of persuasion is strong reasoning. We've talked about credibility, evidence, now reasoning. Reasoning is taking the evidence and putting it together to prove a conclusion. In logic, it's called an argument. This is also part of logos. Now, reasoning is the process of drawing a conclusion based on evidence. There are four types. We reason from specific instances to a conclusion, from facts to a conclusion. My psychology course was easy. My roommate's psychology course was also easy. My sister's psychology course was easy. All psychology courses are easy. Well, that's reasoning, drawing a conclusion from specific instances. We reason from principle. That moves from a general principle, which, by the way, most people generally accept to be true, to a specific conclusion. Well, because the Constitution gives the right to vote to all citizens, that's the general principle. Specific, women are citizens, then the Constitution guarantees women the right to vote. That's arguing from a general principle to a conclusion. Causal reasoning is establishing a relationship between causes and effects. I went outside yesterday. It had been snowing. I slipped on the ice. I fell. I broke my arm. Well, that's cause and effect. The ice was there. It caused the slip. The effect, I broke my arm. Analogical reasoning compares similar cases and infers that what is true of one will also be true of the other. If John can play ping pong very well, he can also play tennis very well. Well, that's using an analogy. That's analogical reasoning. Let's move on. Now, there are fallacies in reasoning. There are several. I have some illustrations here. First is a hasty generalization. It's a conclusion based on, the key word here is insufficient evidence. The sampling is too small. We could say all those movie stars are really rude. I asked Kevin Costner for his autograph in a restaurant the other evening, and he told me to get lost. Well, that's a hasty generalization about all movie stars. A false cause is because one event follows another, the first caused the second. The Latin phrase is post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore, because of this. A black cat crossed in front of John's path yesterday, and as you might expect, he had a car accident that afternoon. Well, that's a false cause. An invalid analogy is when two cases that are compared are not essentially alike. They're different in some essential aspects. Employees are like nails. Just as nails must be hit on the head to get them to work, employees must be hit on the head to get them to work. Well, nails and people are exactly alike. There are significant, obviously, differences. The bandwagon is, it's true because it's popular. Everybody's doing it. Lots of people bought this album, therefore, conclusion, it must be good. That may not be the case. Red herring is an attempt to hide or divert attention from the real issue by bringing up an irrelevant issue. You're talking to your parents about your bad grades. They're a little bit upset. And you say, you're always picking on me. You never pick on my little brother or my younger sister. That's trying to change the subject, divert attention away from the real issue. Then there's ad hominem, and that's just simply attacking the person and not dealing with the real issue. Someone might say the American Trial Lawyers Association favors this piece of legislation, so you know it must be bad for ordinary citizens. Well, that is a fallacy in reasoning. And then there's the either or. This forces audience to choose between two alternatives when more than one alternative exists. Peck Hall is in bad shape. Either we tear it down or put up a new building, or we continue to risk student safety. Well, there are probably more alternatives than that. Slippery slope means if you take the first step, it will lead to other steps, which ultimately will lead to this terrible consequence. If the Supreme Court allows abortion, next thing you know, they'll allow euthanasia. And it won't be long before society disposes of all persons whom it deems unwanted or undesirable. Well, that's a slippery slope. That's a fallacy in reasoning. And then appeal to tradition. Because it's old, it's better than something new. There's no reason to abolish the traditional lecture method of teaching. After all, it's been around for thousands of years. That's appeal to tradition. That may not be true. That's a fallacy in reasoning. Or appeal to novelty. We should adopt the flipped classroom approach to teaching because it's brand new. Well, that's not a good reason to or believe that to be true either. So, those are fallacies in reasoning. There are many others. These are the ones we have time to mention. Now, the fourth method, we've looked at credibility, evidence, and reasoning, is appealing to emotions. Aristotle called this pathos. Fear is an emotion speakers appeal to. Compassion, maybe veterans who are disabled. Pride, family, country, school. Maybe they try to stir our anger, terrorists, vandals. Maybe they try to make us feel guilty to get us to move and take action, not helping the needy or ignoring people who have needs. Or maybe they appeal to reverence, traditions, or a person. These are all emotions that speakers appeal to, and there will be no movement from the audience unless you do appeal to our emotions. Now, creating emotional appeal. How do we do it? Use emotional language. There are trigger words that when you say them, they evoke an emotional response from people. We could say pit bull, and for one group of people, that evokes fear. For another, well, they are kind and feel like they're gentle. Use vivid examples. In class, when you're doing your research, if you find a great story, a very descriptive story, get that, put it in your speech, reword it, give the person credit if you paraphrase it or if you cite it exactly as they told the story. And then again and again, speak with enthusiasm, speak with conviction, really believe in what you're trying to influence us to do, or we will not. Ethics and emotional appeal. Hitler obviously misused it. He had improper motives. Martin Luther King had good, proper motives, and he used many emotional appeals. It's proper to use it as long as your motives are correct. Movement requires appeal to the heart and the head. You can't just appeal to us with logic. We'll get bored. You've got to touch our emotions. You've got to touch the heart. So build your speech on a strong foundation of facts and testimony and supporting evidence, and then use emotional appeals. The evidence, statistics, expert testimony are like the gunpowder you pack in the barrel, but nothing happens and there's no movement without a spark. The emotional appeals are the spark to the logic that gets people to move. In class, if you will do these things, you will become a powerful influencer.